Hey, what's up, YouTube family? It's your favorite black guy from Nebraska. And yes, indeed, there are black people here in Nebraska. Today's content is per request from an individual who commented on my video that I made yesterday. He asked me if I can speak on the Aborigines of Australia, and I said, of course I can. Okay, this chapter that I'm reading out of for today's content is out of a book called When the World Was Black: The Untold History of the World's First Civilizations. Part 1, Prehistoric Culture. All right, now when I make this content, I do want to make a side note. I am not making this content to supersede or to make it seem like black people are superior. I'm not doing that. But what I'm doing is I am going against the narrative that black people have no history, no culture, or anything of the such. That our story begins with slavery and it ends with where we are right now. And that is not true. So the truth deserves to be told, okay? If we're going to have people who are going to spin one narrative, then there should be enough space for the actual narrative that's backed up by resources to be told as well, okay? So a fair exchange is not a robbery. So let's go ahead and get started. I don't want to take up too much of your time. This is going to be a little lengthy, but it's going to be worth it. Australia, the black fellas down under. I'm going to read you a quote by Charles Perkins, an Aboriginal activist. We know we cannot live in the past, but the past lives in us. That's cold. One thing you'll draw from this book is that the same things that have happened to black people over the world. In Australia, we find the same tragic story that happened to the original people of the Americas, Africa, and Asia. That story can be summed up in one word: annihilation. The Aboriginal people of Australia were subject to a true genocide, including the theft of their land and natural resources, being forced to live in the desert reservations, being hunted down and shot like dogs, and even lynchings in the same fashion as in colonial America. While films like Rabbit Proof Fence and The Tracker tell some of this story, there is no film, to my knowledge, that captures the way our people in Australia were killed off and violently repressed. In fact, many of the Aboriginal populations of the area, such as the Tasmanians, are now gone forever. Meanwhile, the survivors have been left to witness the theft and co-opting of their land, their cultural traditions and knowledge. Certain folks might like boomerangs and didgeridos. I don't know how to pronounce that, sorry. But nobody wants to talk about what happened to the people they belong to. And indeed, Australia has much to teach us, so long as we do not look through the deceptive lenses of culture bandits like Marlo Morgan, who we'll soon discuss. After all, these are people whose way of life worked for over 60,000 years. By comparison, it would seem that our society is near collapse after only 5 centuries. Let's go ahead and read another quote. The Australian native can withstand all the reverses of nature: fiendish droughts and sweeping floods, horrors of thirst and enforced starvation, but he cannot withstand Western civilization. Now that is a quote made by Daisy May Bates, an Australian activist. So why don't we hear about Australia when we talk of ancient black civilizations? Because given the limited scope provided by the Western model for civilization, which we discussed earlier, the black people of Australia never had civilization. They never congregated into large urban centers and built big stone buildings surrounded by farmland. But who's to say they weren't advanced? Even though they maintained relatively the same way of life since the time they settled there, they didn't have many problems until Europeans came. All the anthropological accounts of the Aborigines, as well as James Bondwick's 1870 account, Daily Life and the Origin of Tasmanians, describe a way of life that made perfect sense given the population density and environment. Let's go ahead and read another quote. Our culture is something that has sustained us for thousands and thousands of years and will continue to do so in generations to come. That is a quote by Hetty Perkins. That is, the Aborigines didn't need urban centers because they had plenty of room to spread out and plenty of natural food resources to live comfortably. They had so much free time that they preserved a rich, complex culture involving several layers of cosmologies and hundreds of traditions to go along with them. And when a need arose, they met it with a surprising, to modern researchers at least, degree of intelligence and ingenuity. For example, the recent discovery of a 35,000-year-old stone axe in Arnhem Land, Australia, is much more advanced than was expected. Archaeologist Adam Brum noted, this is a statement by archaeologist Adam Brum, Aboriginal material culture was regarded by early European observers as the most primitive technology on Earth. Yet, at the same time, that early European hunters were using stone arrowheads to bring down large and dangerous Ice Age animals. The ancestors of modern-day Aboriginal people employed an equally, if not more sophisticated type of stone tool in order to gain access to vital foods. Okay, now this is a side note in this chapter that goes, it's like I said, it's a side note, just something that you should know. It says, did you know? In 1990, Marlo Morgan self-published a book titled Mutant Message Down Under, which chronicles the life-changing journey of a middle-aged white woman living with a group of 62 desert Aborigines, known as the Real People. Morgan claimed the book was her true story, and that she was now recognized as the Aborigine. People loved the story, and Morgan enjoyed a profitable lecturing career. But then someone thought to find out who the real people were. Aboriginal groups established that there was no such group and that Morgan had never been to that area she claimed. In 1996, a group of Aboriginal elders, seriously disturbed by the book's fabrications and concerned that it was being turned into a major motion picture, earned a grant to travel to the United States, where they publicly confronted Morgan. They made her admit that it was all a fraud. Yet Morgan continued doing lectures, supported by the New Age community, who didn't seem to care about any of this controversy, because it was making money. Because the message was so deep, it didn't matter. When Aboriginal elders showed up again at a lecture, they said they represent all that is bad, and I represent all that is good. In 1998, she got a book deal for a second book, Message from Forever, a novel of Aboriginal wisdom, which she claims is really written by Aboriginal friends telling me to please do this. And that behavior and what she did was absolutely disrespectful, disgusting, and all those words. So this is just an example of what colonization is. Someone coming to your land, taking the land from you, taking your resources from you, and benefiting themselves from it without giving you anything to sustain yourself with. Now let's go ahead and continue on the story in this chapter. In other words, Australia was at the forefront of a technological innovation 35,000 years ago. Let's read another quote. This painting is not from today. We've got a story. We've got laws. We not only believe of land, we believe of even river or creek or saltwater. That's our own law and story. Now that quote was from Gerwin Gumana, which is an Aboriginal activist. Before Europeans pushed the Australians into the desert fringes of their old homelands, they had easy access to thousands of plants and animals, which they knew well. Before Europeans came, Aborigines had few physical ailments and few, if any, mental health issues or addictions. Early accounts note Aborigines being repulsed by the thought of drinking the white man's grog. But before long, these people were plagued by alcoholism. In fact, in the initiation process of, I don't know how to pronounce this, guys, I'm going to spell it, Euahlaye, boys, they were told that their shamans could see in their sacred crystals images of the future. They saw the black color of the people growing paler and paler, until at last only the white faces of the Wunda, or spirits of the dead, and white devils were seen, as if it should mean that some day no more blacks should be on this earth. The account continues. The reason of this must surely be that the tribes fell away from the Burach rites, and in his wrath, Biami, the Allfather, stirred from his crystal seat in Bonima. He has said that as long as the blacks kept his sacred laws, so long should he stay in his crystal seat, and the blacks live on the earth. But if they fail to keep up the Burach rites as he had taught them, then he would move, and their end would come, and only Wunda or white devils be in their country. Does that sound familiar? Doesn't that sound like what God said he would do for the Israelites if they didn't keep his law? So, in my opinion, this is another tribe of black people having the same story as those of the Israelites. So, something to think about. This chapter is pretty long. It has a good amount of information in it. So, there will be a part 2 to this. So, if you're listening to the guy that asked me to make this content, there's going to be a part 2, okay? And there might just even be a part 3 because there's a lot of information in here when it comes to the Aborigines of Australia, and it deserves to be told. So, I hope you guys enjoyed today's content. It's your favorite black guy from Nebraska. Yes, there's black people here in Omaha, Nebraska. I'm out. I'll see you in the next one. Maybe later today. Peace.